Have you ever been called too intense? Maybe you've heard you feel too deeply, think too much, is love too hard, even care too much, and you've probably wondered, what's wrong with me? Well, I'm here to tell you exactly what's wrong with you. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. What you carry isn't a defect. It's a gift. A gift that neuroscience is now confirming and that Carl Jung mapped out over a century ago. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to prove it to you in a way that will completely change how you see yourself. In September of 2024, Dr. Mark Brackett, director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, appeared on the Huberman Lab podcast and revealed something that millions of intense people needed to hear. He said that emotional intensity isn't a problem to be solved. It's a capacity to be understood. Dr. Brackett developed a tool called the mood meter that shows how intense people operate in quadrants that most people can't even access. High level of energy, high intensity of feeling. Whether it's pleasure or discomfort, the intense person feels everything amplified. But here's what Dr. Brackett didn't say in that episode, and what I'm about to reveal now. Jung already knew this, not in 2024, but in 1921. In his book, Psychological Types, Jung described a specific type of person he called the intuitive introvert. This type, according to Jung, is destined to be misunderstood because they perceive the world in a way that most people can't even imagine. Hold on, because what's coming next is even more unsettling. Neuroscience has discovered that there's a structure in the brain called the insula. The insula is responsible for interoception, the ability to feel your own body, to feel your heartbeat, or to feel that knot in your stomach, to sense when something is wrong even before you know what it is. Neuroimaging studies published in 2024 show that highly sensitive people have a significantly more active insula than average. Not a little more active, significantly more active. That means when you walk into a room and feel the tension before anyone even speaks, it's not paranoia, it's neurology. When you look at someone and know something is wrong, even if they're smiling, it's not mystical intuition. It's your hyperactive insula processing thousands of signals that the average brain ignores. But there's more. The amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for emotional processing and the fight or flight response. In intense people, the amygdala also operates differently. It's more responsive, faster, more sensitive. Which means you're not exaggerating when you say something affected you deeply. Your brain literally processes that experience more intensely than the brain of someone who called you dramatic. Hold on to that information. It will make sense in a little bit. Jung wrote something in his works that went unnoticed by almost everyone. He said that extreme sensitivity isn't a weakness. It's a different form of consciousness. A consciousness that perceives the deeper layers of reality. The layers that most people simply don't have access to. Think about it. You've probably spent your entire life trying to fit in, trying to diminish your intensity, trying to talk less, feel less, care less. And you've probably noticed that the more you try to shrink yourself, the unhappier you become. That's not a coincidence. It's neurology. Your brain was built to operate at high intensity. When you try to operate at low, you enter into conflict with your own biology. Now comes the part that no one talks about. And the reason why you've probably been rejected so many times. When an intense person enters a room, something happens in the brains of the people around them. The intense presence activates the amygdala of other people, not because you're doing something wrong, but because your energetic frequency is different, higher, more dense. And the human brain is programmed to react to differences. Neuroimaging studies published in 2024 in the Journal of Neuroscience show that the human brain processes different people with greater activation in the amygdala. This means that when someone finds you too intense, it's not necessarily because you're doing something wrong. It's because that person's brain is registering your difference. And difference to the primitive brain can feel like a threat. Jung called this shadow projection. When someone rejects your intensity, often that person is rejecting something that exists within themselves, something they've repressed, something they don't have the courage to access. You, with your intense presence, involuntarily activate the repressed shadow of others. And instead of confronting their own shadow, it's easier to label you too intense. Remember when I said to hold on to that information about the amygdala? Here's the connection. Research shows that intense people have different neural connectivity. Specifically, the connection between the amygdala and an area called the PAG, the periaqueductal gray, is weaker in highly sensitive people. The PAG is responsible for modulating anxiety responses. When that connection is weaker, it means that the person feels emotions more intensely and has less automatic ability to dampen them. This isn't a defect, it's a different configuration. A configuration that allows you to feel more, perceive more, connect more deeply, but also a configuration that comes with a price. The price of living in a world that was built for people of average intensity. Jung understood this a century before neuroscience confirmed it. He wrote that the intuitive introvert lives in their own world, a world of subtle perceptions and deep connections that most people simply can't see. And because of that, this type of person often feels alienated, misunderstood, as if they're speaking a language that no one else understands. But here's what Jung also said, and this is crucial. He said that this same sensitivity that causes suffering is the source of extraordinary gifts. The ability to perceive what others don't, to feel what others don't, to access depths that others don't even know exist. In September of 2024, when Brackett explained on the Huberman Lab podcast that we shouldn't label emotions as good or bad, he was echoing something that Jung wrote a century ago. Jung said that emotional intensity isn't something to be cured. It's something to be integrated, channeled, directed. Think about what this means for you. You've probably spent years trying to cure yourself of your intensity, trying to be less, lighter, easier, and you've probably failed repeatedly. Not because you're weak, but because you were trying to cure something that isn't a disease. You were trying to fix something that isn't broken. Neuroscience confirms it. A 2025 study, published in the Journal of Psychology and Human Behavior, showed that highly sensitive people who develop emotional regulation don't lose their intensity, they learn to channel it. And these people report greater life satisfaction than the average population. Read that again. Greater life satisfaction, not in spite of the intensity, but because of it. This contradicts everything you've probably heard your entire life. You've probably been told that you need to relax, to calm down, to let it go. And you've probably tried and it probably didn't work because you weren't built to let it go. You were built to feel deeply, process intensely, and transform those experiences into something meaningful. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the path of becoming who you really are. And for intense people, individuation doesn't mean becoming less intense. It means becoming aware of the intensity, owning it, capable of using it as a tool instead of being enslaved by it. Now comes the practical part. What do you do with this information? Mark Brackett at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence taught at the Huberman Lab a technique called distancing. When you're in the middle of an intense emotional experience, you mentally take a step back, not to suppress the emotionness, but to observe it, to understand what it's trying to tell you. Jung called this the transcendent function, the ability to observe your own internal states without being completely dominated by them. Here's a protocol that combines Jung and Huberman's wisdom. First, when you feel the intensity rising, don't try to stop it. Observe. Ask yourself where in your body you're feeling it. This activates the insula consciously. Instead of being dominated by the sensation, you become an observer of it. Second, identify what Jung would call the activated complex. Ask yourself, when was the first time you felt something similar? Often, the present intensity is connected to an experience from the past. Identifying that connection already diminishes part of the burden. Third, use what Huberman calls the physiological sigh. 2 short inhales through the nose, followed by a long exhale through the mouth. This activates the parasympathetic nervous system and helps to regulate the intensity. without suppressing it. Fourth, write. Jung believed deeply in the power of externalizing internal contents. When you put what you're feeling on paper, you take the emotion out of the closed circuit of the mind and transform it into something that can be analyzed. This doesn't eliminate the intensity, but it allows you to work with it instead of being worked by it. This is the point where most people stop. But I'm going further. There's something that neither Jung nor Huberman explained directly, but that the synthesis of the two reveals. The intensity that you carry isn't just a personal characteristic, it's a function. You were built to perceive what others don't perceive, to feel what others don't feel, to capture the nuances, the subtleties, the deeper layers of human experience. This means you have a responsibility, not to diminish yourself to fit into the world, but to find the spaces where your intensity is needed, the relationships where it's valued, the jobs where it's useful, the missions where it's essential. Think of the greatest artists in history, the greatest thinkers, the greatest innovators. Almost all were considered too intense for their time. Almost all were misunderstood. Almost all suffered because of their sensitivity. And almost all channeled that same sensitivity into works that transformed the world. Jung suffered. Freud called him a mystic and rejected him. The scientific community ridiculed him. He went through a deep psychological crisis that he himself described as a confrontation with the unconscious. But it was exactly that intensity, that ability to dive into the depths, that allowed him to map the human psyche in ways that we're still discovering 100 years later. You're not sick. You don't need fixing. You need understanding of yourself, of what you carry, and of why you carry it. If you felt something listening to these words, YouTube has that golden heart down there, the super thanks. When an intense person recognizes another intense person through this gesture, something happens. It's not just financial support, it's a signal, a confirmation that you're not alone in this experience, that there are others who feel what you feel, that perceive what you perceive, that carry what you carry. Each super thanks strengthens that invisible network of people who dare to feel deeply. In a world that insists on superficiality, now I'm going to give you the last pieces of the puzzle. A 2024 study on the highly sensitive brain showed something crucial. Intense people don't just have more active brain regions, they have different connectivity between regions, specifically greater connectivity in the ventral attention networks, dorsal attention networks, and limbic network. What does this mean in practice? It means that your brain makes connections that other brains don't make, sees patterns that others don't see, processes information in a more integrated way. This explains why you often know things you shouldn't know, why you perceive dynamics that others ignore, why you connect dots that seem unrelated to others. Jung called this the intuitive function, the ability to perceive possibilities or connections and meanings that aren't on the surface. And he said that people with this highly developed function are often seen as mystics or eccentrics, not because they're irrational, but because they perceive a layer of reality that most simply don't have access to. 30% of the world's population is considered highly sensitive. That's almost 2 billion people. You're not an aberration, you're part of a natural variation of humanity, a variation that exists because it has evolutionary value, because tribes that had intense and sensitive people survived better, because these people perceived dangers, opportunities, and nuances that others didn't perceive. The problem is that modern society was built for the average. Schools were built for the average. Jobs were built for the average. Relationships were modeled for the average. And when you're not the average, when you operate on a different frequency, the system treats you as defective. But you're not defective. You're different. And different isn't a defect. It's variation, it's possibility, it's potential. The question isn't how to become less intense. The question is how to find the contexts where your intensity is valued, how to develop the emotional regulation that allows you to use your intensity instead of being used by it, how to build a life that honors who you really are, instead of forcing you to pretend to be someone you're not. Carl Jung said that the most important task in life is to become who you are, not who others want you to be, not who society says you should be, but who you really are at your core. For those who feel too intensely, this means stopping apologizing for your intensity, stopping trying to shrink yourself, stopping pretending you feel less than you actually do, and starting to seek out the spaces, the people, and the experiences that resonate with who you truly are. This isn't easy. It might mean loneliness in the short term. It might mean rejection from people who can't keep up. It might mean discomfort in leaving behind relationships and situations that demand you be less than you are. But the alternative is worse. The alternative is a lifetime of pretending, a lifetime of diminishing yourself, a lifetime of carrying a gift and treating it like a curse. You were built to feel intensely, to perceive deeply, to connect on levels that most don't even know exist. This isn't your problem, it's your purpose. Neuroscience has confirmed what Carl Jung knew a century ago. The intensity you carry isn't a manufacturing error. It's a specialization, a configuration that allows you to access dimensions of human experience that others simply cannot access. Andrew Huberman at Huberman Lab often discusses how individual differences in brain structure, such as the insula, contribute to these varying levels of emotional depth and awareness. The question now is, what are you going to do with it? Are you too intense for people who can't keep up? Team intensity or team surface level? Let me know in the comments below.